Welcome, everyone, to today's interview. It is my honor to have Gary Jordan and Linda Ross Vega with me tonight. And it's night here. And I'm thrilled, as I was just saying, to be interviewing you because you're going to talk about perception and our styles. And I firmly believe that our perception determines everything. Our experience, we create our reality because we make choices, we decide how to perceive our experience. So welcome, and thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
So can you share with our audience how you came to this awareness that perception is really the basis for everything?
Wow, I love that. Gary, you want to start?
Sure, you bet. Early on in my graduate school, well, actually, early on in my career becoming a psychologist, I noticed that people saw things differently, and a lot of things, conflict and communication, and was based. We seemed to be trying to say the same thing, but we weren't connecting. And so I tried to find a way to understand that. I created a concept of 6 different called back then world images, world views, and that's what I wrote my dissertation on.
Oh.
As time went by, I started being in private practice. I started noticing that they seemed to fall into groups, just like my dissertation was describing. We originally, when Linda Ross and I originally connected with each other, we were talking about this as being a cognitive difference. And as we were training it, some things didn't quite mesh right until we finally realized, no, this is not cognition, this is perception. This is the differences are occurring based on the way people are translating what they receive through their 5 senses and making meaning of it in a different manner. And then everything fell into place.
Wow.
Linda Ross, you want to add to that?
Right. Well, so my background is different. Gary and I met in corporate America, a work situation where I had a troubled project, a very troubled project that I was trying to bring over the line. And I actually hired Gary as a consulting psychologist to help with just the culture and the talent pool. And part of my background was always trying to match people with the right task to make things actually happen, and the obvious observation is when people are doing something that they enjoy and that they have a natural talent for, they do an incredibly better job and things happen on time. And so we meshed the 2 things together, and like Gary was saying, we realized as we were working through the development of the theory that it really was how people were making sense out of the world around them. And then differences occur again based on life experience. So what our theory says is that we take in information through our 5 senses. We filter that information with our perceptual style, with our perception, or you could call it innate biases, same thing, perceptual style. And then we add our life experience, like was this true for us before or not? And so that total thing happens in the blink of an eye. And it's why something is meaningful to me and not to you, or Gary sees it a totally different way. It's fascinating. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's so right. 2 people can have the same experience, and respond to it, interpret it completely different. One person can see it as a failure, another person can see it as a learning experience and build on it.
And we have discovered that happens because they're literally seeing the same experience differently.
Yeah. So
and how they're seeing it differently, it comes to things like what part of it was important, whether it mattered, whether it didn't matter, what part stood out for them. Okay. And so that creates differences because we're saying this part's important to me, and the other person didn't even see that. It's the fundamental basis of crime stories, right? There are 7 witnesses and nobody saw the same thing.
Exactly. So can you talk about these different perception styles and how it relates to why we're here, our emotions around money.
Okay.
Sure.
So
You want
there-
to start?
Sure, there's 6 different perceptual styles in our theory, and what way we like to say it is that we're not truth with a capital T, because there's all sorts of different ways to describe human beings and what they do and how they view the world and how they come into it. But we found that there is truth with a small t in what we describe. Would you like me to name the styles, Linda Ross? You think that's valuable?
Sure, that's a great idea.
They go around, they're theoretically related to each other. And I always start with vision is the one, then you go around the circle a bit, you get goals, and then what we call methods, then adjustments, flow, activity, and you're back to vision again. And what we find is fascinating is that I'm elaborating a little bit on what we said before, is that when someone has take a vision person, an adjustments person, they're in the same situation. It's not only that they see things differently, they attend to things differently. What's important to them, certain opportunities will pop out for the vision person, whereas it's the information that is what's going to grab the adjustment person's attention. And so that's what begins to determine how they approach a situation and how they see new ways to take their talents into the world.
And I think to sort of explore that a little bit around money, obviously our life experience around money has a lot to do with how we feel about money. So, but if we back up and we say first with perceptual style, with perceptual style, for example, some styles are a little bit more just willing risk takers, that they do it naturally. They have a belief intuitively that they'll figure it out when they get there, right? So to them, something isn't as risky as it seems to someone else who seems like, oh my gosh, I really need a lot of information before I would jump off that particular sidewalk. So it's taking that initial attitude about what's risky, what's not risky, how much fact you need, how much, or whether you move based on emotion. Like one of the styles, activity specifically, makes meaning through experience. So they're very experiential. So if they've had a positive experience with money in the past, they'll carry that forward on how they approach the next situation. If they've had a very negative experience with it, they'll carry that forward. And without some review of, is that an always or never experience? Is that a situational experience? That attitude towards money will get cemented because of an experience. Whereas another style will do it based on facts that they've been told, whether they've experienced it or not.
And do you see these styles, do they start at a certain age, and can we change?
I love it. Well, we believe that your perceptual style is innate. You were born with it. Okay. And it is actually the foundation of all your natural strengths. Think of it. The way you make meaning of the world around you is very congruent with what you can naturally see and do well, what you're attracted to, what, it's an alignment with how you're making meaning. So it doesn't change over your life. Your awareness does. Your awareness of it changes, and your self-esteem about it can change, because as children, one of the interesting things about our research is that usually your parents are going to have 2 different styles. There aren't a lot of same style parenting situations that we've run into. But you're not guaranteed. It's not inherited. It's innate. You're not guaranteed that you're going to be like one of your parents. And if you have multiple siblings, there's a high chance there's going to be 4 or 5, maybe even 6 styles in your family, right? So what's your natural strengths may be valued or devalued depending on who's in charge, right? So over time, as you move into situations that value who you are more, then your awareness of your style and I would say self-esteem about your style grows and grows and grows.
This is also a great place, I think, to go back to the money issue, because each style has what we call finite, but very, very broad and wide range of what we call natural skills. And everybody has natural skills, and natural skills are, like the name would imply, they come to you easily. You don't have to, all skills have to be developed, but natural skills, they take a whole lot less development than what we call acquired skills, which are ones that don't belong to you. They also take on I like to say, a life of their own. They move, they change, they mold, they adapt to new situations where acquired skills do not. And this is one of the keys, is that you can earn well doing acquired skills, but it's going to cost you a lot in terms of your it'll wear you out psychologically and emotionally and physically. Whereas I see, you know, if you pushed me, I'd say the people who are really highly successful are earning their living using their natural skills. And if you're in a situation where you've been told that your natural skills are not valuable or not worthwhile because of, you know, the family you grew up in, you're going to downplay your natural skills and try to make your living and your life work out of acquired skills. And from a money standpoint, that's not a long-term win.
No, not at all. And you know, it's fascinating about that too, is that when you're doing something that's aligned with your natural skills, it's easier, it grows, it's more fun, it doesn't feel like work. The acquired skills, they feel like the definition of work. It's just, and we're not talking quality. You can be exceptionally good at acquired skills, but we're talking quantity. It's the ability to just do it all the time that makes a huge difference.
The phrase that we use is that with acquired skills, the joy comes from getting it done. And with natural skills, the joy comes from the doing itself.
Oh, that's really profound. I think you actually need to repeat that, because I think it's really important.
Okay. With acquired skills, you get joy and satisfaction because I got through it. I'm finished. I'm done. I got it done. With natural skills, the joy comes from the actual doing. It's performing the skill itself that gives you satisfaction, not necessarily the accomplishment that I'm trying to get to, the way it is with acquired skills.
I think that's so true. And I think it's the basis, at least for me, and I'd love you to comment on this, why what I do doesn't feel like work.
Absolutely. That's what we say. Acquired skills is the definition of work, whereas natural skills is joyful.
And that's not bad. We all need certain acquired skills, and some we can acquire. You know, I've certainly learned how to do things that weren't my natural talent. And there are things, no matter how hard I try, I'm just not good at. Do not ask me to read a map. I can do it to save my life. I don't know why, but I can't. And so we need to value what we can do, not devalue ourselves just because there are certain things we're not good at. And I think this has really practical implications, especially for entrepreneurs, for all of us, but especially for entrepreneurs, because if there's something you're not good at, don't do it. Hire someone.
Yeah,
that's the truth. That's the truth. You know, it's really interesting. It's a somewhat of a phenomenon, and I'm sure you're aware of this. It's natural for people to pay more attention to negative feedback than it is to positive feedback.
Yes.
And brains develop that way, right? So we tend to over-fixate on perceived weaknesses or things we don't do well. And one of the reasons Gary and I stress strength so much is not that, it's because each perceptual style has just a magnitude of natural strengths, but also blind spots. I mean, human, right? You know, nobody's perfect, right? So there's blind spots. And people always want to know their blind spots first. And we go, no. Let's look at your strengths, because if you can stand in your strengths and then take a look at your weaknesses and blind spots, you can put them in perspective. Is it something I really need to do because it's important to my life and there's no one else that can do it?
Right.
Or is it like, wow, really not that bad? And isn't it great that there's someone else for whom that's a strength? way
Yeah.
cool. But, you know, when it comes to a lot of programs where people are working on things, they tend to highlight what they think they do wrong and then try and go find someone that they think does it right.
Yeah.
And this comes back to what we say about styles, because one size doesn't fit all. So I may be able to recognize that this other person does this thing that I want to do really well, but the way their methodology, the way they do it, fits their perceptual style. It doesn't fit mine. And so what'll happen is people will start to think that they're failing at it when, you know, everybody can learn to sell, everybody can lead, everybody, but you have to do it in a way, everybody can be organized, but you have to do it in a way that's in alignment with how you make meaning of the world.
Absolutely. And we tend, I think, you know, part of it is cultural. You know, there's this cultural do it yourself thing that we should be good at everything, you know,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make sense. Time, especially if it's a struggle, especially if it takes me 3 hours to do something because it's a struggle and it's not my talent, versus hiring someone who can do it in 15 minutes. That
Exactly.
was a hard concept for me to learn because it felt like a failure if I couldn't do it, until I really focused on the nuts and bolts of it. And I'm like, this doesn't even make economic sense.
Exactly. But you know,
That set me free.
I wonder if that's not something that all entrepreneurs go through, because when Gary and I started this business a bunch of years ago, it was I left corporate America and he left private practice at the time for us to do this. And my husband is part of our company as well, and we have some other team members, and we would be like slogging our way through all of the things to get started for the startup, you know, and everything in place. And then we'd find ourselves procrastinating over some things. And what were the things we were procrastinating about? The assignments we'd taken on that didn't play to our strengths, right?
Yeah.
So we started a code on the team. People would look at each other and go, "Live the theory. That's not yours." I'll take that one.
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense. And you know, I'm going back to something you said earlier because I think it's so true. And maybe it's the reason, you know, the cliche opposites attract, but most couples and even business partners I see, they really do complement each other. It's not that they have the same strengths. It's that they have different perception styles and different strengths that makes it work.
I think you're right. I think that's our experience too. So Gary mentioned that we show the styles as a wheel. And so if you think of 6 pieces of pie, everyone has an opposite. Everyone has 2 next door neighbors.
Oh,
And everyone has 2 that we call them one-offs. They're not neighbors and they're not opposite, right? And there's very definite interactions that happen between those kinds of relationships. And the best relationships we find are the ones where people value the strength that the other person brings that they don't have.
yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important.
And the most competitive relationships tend to be those where it's someone of the same style. So you're thinking along the same line, but your answer can be totally different based on life experience. And that can throw people for a loop. So, you know, we do see lots of really successful working relationships with that. But I will say in the 30 some years we've been doing this, I haven't met any life partners that were the same style. They may be hiding out there somewhere, but I haven't met them yet.
So I think this is important for everyone to hear, but especially for entrepreneurs. And that is, we need to value our strengths and not focus on, I'll say weaknesses, although they're not weaknesses. And I think that, you know, I obviously talk about, you know, how we have to move from out of self-doubt. And one way that is so important is to value our strengths, focus on what we do right, what we do well, not what we can't do.
Yes.
Exactly.
We have also found that one of the reasons that entrepreneurs will often do that is that they overvalue what they can't do.
Oh, yes.
And so
Talk
they
about
think,
that.
so they think that if I do all these things that are easy for me, I'm not doing the hard stuff. I'm not doing the stuff that I really need to get done. Whereas it's easy because it's natural, and that's what you
Mm,
should be focused on. And you
yes.
should be, rather than wasting your time, and I do mean that wasting your time on that stuff that's acquired, that doesn't belong to you naturally, that is taking you away from the very things that you should be focused on. So that you want to build your team around finding people, as you said earlier, Audrey, that do the things that you don't do well, rather than trying to figure out how to do them yourself.
Yeah, and I think this goes back too, because the basis of whether we're an entrepreneur or an employee is to value what we do. And there's this belief that it only counts if it's hard,
Right.
if you've struggled. And so the stuff that comes easy to us, you're right, in this culture, for whatever reason, we tend to devalue.
Absolutely.
Exactly. It's fascinating when people will take the assessment and find their style, and they'll go, oh, I thought everybody could do that. It's like,
Yes.
no. People take for granted the things that they do well, and therefore they don't give it the value that it deserves. They don't realize this is something they're bringing to the table that nobody else is, right?
No, and not to devalue people when they find something hard. It's like
Exactly.
the standard. Well, I'll just give you a personal example. My husband can visualize things, and in houses, how this is going to look, how that's going to look. And he talks to me and I just look at him dumbfounded, because
Right.
it's like, okay, honey, because that is just not my strength.
My phrase when something like that comes up is, you're asking the wrong person.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. And I see it. And, I think it's really useful for people in our audience to go back and think about what our experience was like in school, because so many times when I worked with children, what I used to say, we all have learning disabilities,
Yeah.
except some unfortunately are needed. Some skills are needed, some aren't in school.
Yep.
And so, what we may have been made to feel bad or devalued because something wasn't our strength. I mean, the only D I ever got was in art. I cannot draw to save my life. Luckily, I didn't want to be an artist or I'd have been in trouble. But, there are certain things that are really valued in traditional schools and in our culture. And if that's not your strength, you can start to really devalue yourself.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Gary, it made me think about the story that you remember you wrote that thing several years ago about the school where they were teaching the bunny rabbits to fly and the eagles to do something else.
It's actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that. Go for it.
It's a children's story where they talk about the different animals. Children go off to school, and the rabbit comes home and Dad says, "How was school today?" And the rabbit says, "Well, it wasn't all that great. We had flying class today, and I don't fly very well." And the father said, "Well, I guess you won't have to take flying class anymore." And he goes, "No, they're going to make me take 2 flying classes." And that's what we do, is when we don't do it well, we make the people do more of it.
Yeah.
Go find what they do and teach them, help them to develop that.
Develop our strengths and value ourselves. And
Yes.
when we make our living, whether it's as an entrepreneur or not, or whether you're not working, we see the world through our strengths.
Yes.
Exactly.
And if we don't value ourselves, then we don't think we have anything to offer.
Right.
And then we think, why should anybody pay us? And then we don't have a business.
Exactly. And strengths are the foundation of your life. I mean, so enjoyment and happiness and everything aren't like a goal. They're just part of the journey. There's going to be ups and downs.
Yeah.
If you know your strengths, that's what you have to actually help you enjoy the joy more often, and also hold you steady in the bad times. And if you don't have that foundation, it's like you flounder as life hits you with the various things that happen. And it's especially true in a business. If you're starting your own business, or if you, even if you've been in business for a while, there are good days and bad days. But
Yeah.
if you know your strengths, you've got something solid to lean on. If you don't, there's panic and stress every time.
Yeah, and that the idea of, I'll call it resourcefulness or just practicality. Some things we need to learn enough to get by in
Yes.
in business and in life. We need to balance our checkbook or read a financial statement or know how to drive a car. And so there are some things we have to get at least good enough at. And there are other things that hopefully we can farm out to somebody else. But you're helping me see so much the the lack of sense to force ourselves to be good at something that we're just not good at. Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't want to be a rabbit who wants to fly.
Exactly.
That just
Exactly.
makes me feel crummy.
You want to
Well,
go to hopping class.
Yeah,
yeah,
I want to teach a hopping class.
exactly. And then have the support, from the other places. But yeah, it's extremely important. And it's so funny. I mean, you'd be amazed. Well, I'm sure you encounter the same thing, that as people recognize that something actually is a strength, there's this like relief, and there's a feeling of validation, like,
Yeah.
oh, you're right, I can do that. And oh, you're right, I really don't like that. And that's totally okay, right?
Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge.
And then to just, again, rather than trying to be good at something, find what helps you. If you can't, add numbers in your head, open an Excel sheet. Just
Right.
and like I said, instead of trying to be the rabbit who's learning to fly, get on an airplane, figure out the best way to succeed, regardless.
Exactly.
We don't have to do everything ourselves.
Yeah.
And as Gary mentioned before, with strengths, they continue to grow because they're natural. So,
Yes.
once you discover them, or you open the door to looking at it, because everybody's got a lot of potential they haven't tapped into, because we just, either we're unaware that we can do it, or life hasn't presented us with an opportunity, or we learn to do it somebody else's way and think we don't like it. And if we just did it our way, we would. The point is, once you start doing them, it's like that, the theory of unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, you get to unconscious competence, and it continues to grow. So if you have an awareness of things that you do well and look for opportunities to do more of that, that strength actually grows. And that's the seed of expertise and wisdom around the strengths that you have.
And I would add to that too. It's not just that the opportunity to use them grows, but that people notice what you're doing, and the opportunity to new opportunities for more business, for more connection, for more, they present themselves when people experience you as doing that which you do naturally well.
Yes.
That makes so much sense. And then we grow because we still, just because it's our natural, I'd love you to comment on this, just because it's our natural strength doesn't necessarily mean that we're always comfortable. We can still grow and experience some discomfort and some challenge, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means we're expanding on our talents, hopefully, and growing.
Yes.
Well, my comment would be, is like I said earlier on, that all talent, all skills need development.
Yeah.
And they need to be nurtured. They need to be, supported. So that very much so that as the skills get, some of that requires repetition and work. But again, it's the work that feels good, as
Yeah.
opposed to the work I just want to get through to get it past me.
And I think this is so important because it really helps us, thinking even of some of my own experiences where I wasn't good at something, not viewing them as failures.
Mhm. Yeah.
No, they're experiences, they're, lessons, they're things to learn from and move on. I mean, how do you know unless you try?
Yeah.
So you try and you gain information based on that. And then that information helps you make a judgment to grow or not. And I really liked your point about, even with natural skills, you stretch them. And as you stretch, there's growing pains.
Yeah.
But the fear of failure is so significantly different when you're stretching a little bit on something that you have a foundation on,
Yeah.
versus something that you're just walking out on the ledge for the very first time and you have no clue.
Right.
So I think that's there, but there's always a stretch.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for our audience to hear it, just sort of to summarize, I think, some of the points, and please add to this, that just because something's easy doesn't mean it's not valuable. What
Yeah.
you do in your business is valuable. And just because sometimes you feel some discomfort as you build on that strength doesn't mean it's wrong. Hard doesn't mean it's wrong. We have to be our own judge of, am I building on my strengths or trying to do something that I shouldn't be doing or don't want to do?
Right.
And that helps us build our self-esteem, which then gives us, I don't want to use necessarily the word confidence, because confidence can come and go, but I like self-esteem. It gives us the self-esteem to know that we deserve to be paid for our talents.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Exactly.
So let me ask you a question. What would be your best advice or wisdom for someone who says, I know I'm good at this. I know I can help people, but I don't know. I just don't feel like it's valuable enough for me to ask people to pay me.
Well, my comment would be, the first place you want to start is to help them discover. That's why you can see it behind Linda Ross. It says "Celebrate You." That's our workbook. That's what we want to start first, is that you have to celebrate who you are. To celebrate who you are, you got to discover who you are.
Yeah.
And then valuing and discovering it, that whole process can change the way you perceive and feel about, asking to be paid for what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I would add to that is that when many entrepreneurs start and may have recurring experiences of imposter syndrome, and it's usually because they have forgotten the value. And so sometimes it's a matter of just stepping back for a second and saying, this is something I have to offer, and it's been valuable in my life because of, and list it. Think of all the reasons why this is something you want to share. And then think of the problems that you could help someone else solve because of this. And that can be a regrounding experience to sort of like reshine the light on your talent.
Oh, absolutely. I often have clients build an evidence list. And
Yes.
I tell every time that self-doubt starts to creep in, go look at that list.
Yes.
Bring yourself back to reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Most definitely.
So I'm so excited because one of the resources that you've generously agreed to provide was an assessment, because everything we're talking about really begins with understanding and assessing ourselves. So we will have on our website that link to your resource. And from everything we've talked about, that is just a great starting point for anyone, entrepreneurs, non-entrepreneurs, to learn. Because like you said, I think we started out with this. It really begins with awareness.
Absolutely.
Yes. And self-discovery can, like we've said before, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I think I'll go discover something today. I mean, we're usually confronted with a problem or a crisis or a challenge that we want to overcome. And the point is that it's always a good day to learn a little bit more about yourself. It's always a good day to pay a little more attention to what you do well. And it helps, it pays back in dividends. It's a game changer when you stand in your strengths.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that for me, our business growth, I believe our business growth will never exceed our personal growth.
Amen.
I agree.
100%.
And so the idea of self-discovery, understanding our strengths and valuing them is the foundation. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you would like to add, or parting words of wisdom?
I would just add that because we've been talking so much about natural and acquired strengths, is to put in there that that's part of where the assessment ultimately goes, is that it helps you discover your perceptual style. And then the next step is to begin to see what your natural strength set is and how well are you using them in your life right now.
Yeah, and I'm going to take the assessment because I'm interested also in the part, so I'll just touch on this, that you add to that, which is that, this circle, it also contains valuable information about what my neighbors will be, what your neighbors are, and what the opposite. And I find that so fascinating.
I think it's the gold of relationships. We do a lot of work with that and with teamwork, etc. Because when you understand who you are, you can put in perspective what the differences are. And then having, with perceptual style, in essence, a tool that helps you readily hear and see differences, it allows you to put those differences in perspective and kind of take the personal sting out of disconnects and understand how to reconnect, how to make those connections happen, and also to make choices about whether you want to put the effort into it or not.
Absolutely. And I was a sailor. My husband and I sailed, and in truth, I learned there can only be one captain.
Yes.
And so but we all are valuable. We all bring certain strengths.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. I learned a lot today.
It was really fun, and we really appreciate you. And we hope that your audience takes advantage of every single thing that you've offered on this great summit.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, knowledge is power.
It is.
For sure. Thank you.